on the recording. He's so wonderful. Thank you, Rick. Again, welcome to the second class of Reinvention of Work. And I know others will be joining us as we go along. We had office hours, our first office hours today, and had some great conversations. So know that I will, I always say, inshallah, or with the grace of the divine, I will be getting on it 3:15 Pacific time each week before our class. So if you have any questions or you just want to talk or you just can't get enough of this, I'm on from then and until the end of class. I'm going to share my screen and get us started. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see that as a full screen?
Yes.
Hopefully. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so I am going to get us started. Week 2, and these, I have a suspicion these weeks are going to fly by, but again, welcome. We're going to spend a little time in small groups as well so that you can welcome one another and get time to share. But I wanted to start with some centering, bringing ourselves to this time, that it's time for all of you. My hope is that work as pilgrimage is, this is a time for you to get to reflect, to dive in and consider who you are, what you stand for, and what you want to bring to the world. So to hold that intention, we'll begin with a reading from Martha Postlewaite. I think I said her name correctly. And this is The Clearing. So I will read this and then give us a few minutes in silence, just so that we can bring ourselves here. Do not try to save the whole world or to do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your opened, cupped hands, and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, just a reminder, and for those who are joining us for the first time today, our group norms are to create space for all to speak, to practice respect, and using the term of respect, respect from its French origin of the willingness to look again, that will guard confidentiality with each other, and how we're holding that here is that we can share what we learn, but not share identifying details of others, so that I can take out my learning and share it with others, perhaps in my own spiritual small groups or people that I am working with, but that I'm not sharing personal details of other people in this wonderful group. Is to exercise care and consideration. Is what do you need? And you know, where is your edge? And if you need a break, that very much, this is a class all about choice. I hope that you don't feel like you have to do something, but instead that you're listening to what you need, that this is a class for you so you can bring yourself and what brings you so fully alive to the world, so in need of your support. And then looking where you might find ways to contribute. And some of our class members have been modeling that from the beginning here, sharing their willingness to support us as we want to learn more about the work that they're doing. So I, again, had talked last week about the growing edge. So noticing where is our growing edge in our lives? Am I standing too much in my comfort zone? Am I staying too safe? Or am I, whoa, I've done too much. I'm getting into a place where I'm not centered, but watching where is that place where I am learning and growing, and a little more might be too much, but less is not enough. So there we go. I wanted to make sure that you had time to continue to get to know one another and to bring forward what's been arising for you. So we're going to go into groups of 3 for 15 minutes, 5 minutes per person, and share a bit about you. We're getting to know each other, your name, your location, things you love. And I hope that you've brought, you don't have to have brought your art as meditation results, but what came up? How did you practice art as meditation over the past week? And what did your reflection yield? And what's been coming up for you as you've been thinking about reinventing work, doing the readings, and considering the material that we covered last Thursday. So I am going to stop sharing for a second so I can see everyone's faces. And I'm going to say hello to Linda, who joined us, and other Roxanne. And we will move into small groups for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and debrief. Thank you. Make sure. Here we go. Back. So we're going to continue to use this metaphor of work as pilgrimage of identity, and that we are fellow pilgrims on this path, that we get to share the magic that occurs. Just another example, right? We just heard an example of incredible magic that is occurring on this pilgrimage route. And today I wanted to start return to the 4 stages of change, the 4 paths of creation, spirituality, and
Deirdre,
yeah.
Do you want to change your view? Because we're seeing all the slides on the bottom, one slide and then next slide. So I think if there's some way to,
that's not what's supposed to be happening.
There's some way to click on something that takes you back to you want to look at it.
Did that work?
Good.
Yay, thank you. Dan, AKA watch Deidre's back at every turn. Thank you. Yes, this is exactly where I wanted to be. So again, all about observation and paying attention, and where are we in the landscape? So that could not have been more perfect. But today we're going to talk more about this first stage and how it connects to the Via Positiva and this archetype of being a sage commander on this journey to reinvent our work. So from the Art of War, 3,000-year-old plus Taoist text on approaching challenges, we learn of the sage commander. And it is said that the sage commander would come onto a battlefield, be able to assess where they stand, and who is the opponent, understand the troops, And if that sage commander is meeting with another sage commander, they do not need to do battle. They know who has won before the battle even begins. So how can we be sage commanders in our own lives? What I find fascinating is that, as I've told you about Angela Sarian and her work in the fourfold way, she calls one of the paths when she looks at indigenous and traditional cultures around the world, there's the way of the warrior. So that's where we begin. And thinking about how can I be a sage commander in my own life? How am I? Who am I? How am I? Who are my troops? What are the strengths that I bring? Where am I standing right now? And am I standing, and how am I standing? Am I standing on 2 feet, or am I standing balancing on 1 foot? And some of us, I can raise my hand after 2+ years of a pandemic, find that I'm standing a lot more on 1 foot than I would like. I think I'm okay, but I'm actually more burned out or more extended than I would like to admit. And this is the work of the Sage Commander. It is said that when we're in this first phase, we want to ask transformative questions. We want to slow down and figure out where we are. And also, where do we want to go? The beauty of a pilgrimage is we want to pick where we're going. Are we trying to go to Santiago de Compostela? Are we trying to go to Mecca? Are we trying to go to Rome? Are we trying to walk all of the temples in Japan? Where are we trying to go? So we're going to talk today about the importance of having a vision as we begin to set our direction. And then next week, we're going to dive into our values. So it might be a little bit out of order. But Via Positiva, as we've talked about, is all about awe and gratitude. And what is so beautiful is we know across all of the different traditions that this path of awe and gratitude can be found. And what I find fascinating is that in modern psychology and now what they're calling positive psychology, is that brain studies are proving what we've known for thousands and thousands of years. We want to start with what's working. So I've asked you last week to start considering your personal SWOT analysis, to think about your strengths. Think about areas you'd like to improve, or what we might call weaknesses, where there might be opportunities in this landscape and where there might be threats. So often we go right to the weaknesses, but strengths-based psychology, positive psychology tells us that if we can start with what's working, a homework assignment, of course, again, optional, but a homework assignment I give you is to make sure that strengths portion of your SWOT analysis has at least 10, if not 15 strengths in it. And notice how quickly we might deviate from that. But to start, as again, I feel I'm really bringing Angelus into her deep wisdom here today, she would say to stand in your long, tall body with deep roots. And she would always repeat that, in your long, tall body with deep roots. And so our roots are these strengths, these gifts and talents that we bring. And that it's a way to fill our backpacks as we go on our journey. So for those of you who are working with teams, I recommend, and this is my kind of go-to when I'm doing executive coaching or management consulting, is to share. Start every meeting with what's working, and that what you do is you force people out of their reptilian brains when we're in a place of worry, threat, anxiety, pandemic, war in Ukraine. We naturally land in our reptilian brains, where we only think in the present, we only think about ourselves. and we're in survival mode. We cannot physiologically process gratitude in a reptilian brain. So an ancient art of war trick is to get to your neocortex by thinking of at least 5 things you're thankful for. So using when you're thinking about where you want to go to reinvent work, but as well when you're helping others, and I know we have many mentors on this call today, is starting with strengths, starting with what's working, and then we approach the challenges. Another trick of the everyday warrior is to ask transformative questions. So we want to be asking, and we'll talk about more about these questions, but transformative questions often take us to the paradox. And paradox is where poetry resides. It's where art resides. As you all were sharing about your art as meditation, we were starting to hear about that place of beautiful paradox. So we think of the yin yang symbol as holding paradox, right? You've got the white fish with the black dot and the black fish with the white dot. And yet we have this a similar symbol in the Western traditions as well. And it's called the Mandorela. And Mandorela means almond in Italian. And it is that almond-shaped intersection. So if I were to say that one of these circles was white and the other circle was black, what might you think that the Mandorla would be? Someone's going to say gray to me, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thanks, Patricia. Say gray, right? But what we know is that legend says that it is actually can be perceived as the color of pavonus it can be pavonus, or the color of peacock's feathers. It is considered in culture and in different cultures as a doorway into a new reality. Yes, Vesica Pisces. Thank you, Roxanne, as well. Exactly. So magic, the place of magic, but it is where opposites are dancing. So when we start thinking about the world of work and allowing ourselves to go deep within it, where we are allowing where our joy and our grief meet, where hopelessness and hope, that place of hopefulness meet, and allowing ourselves when we're thinking about where we're being called with our open and cupped hands, that it isn't just, I'm just going to figure out what I do and I'm going to check that box and that everything's going to be perfect and it's all going to be fine. Those of you who have been studying creation spirituality know, and wisdom, you have all bring great wisdom. No, life doesn't really work like that. And yet, if I can hold that incredible paradox as we're listening for where we're called to serve next, it is that breakthrough and that doorway into new realities. So how might I hold that presence and being? And again, as you saw from the Fourfold Way, in this phase, we're called to show up and be present. So meanwhile is to be in presence. And yet, I was beginning this call, bringing in Howard Thurman and thinking about how and others of the civil rights movement, where there was doing and being at the same time, right? And as well, how do another way to think of it is being in a place of presence and allowing things just to be that magnetic nature, all the while where there is a call to act too. We will have the via transformativa. So how do we play with those paradoxes? How do we accept what is and act as change agents? I value the Jewish proverb or saying that says, in one pocket, right, I am, that no one has ever been on this planet that is exactly like me, right? That you are original medicine that has never been here before. And that piece of paper goes in one pocket. And in the other pocket, you have, I am nothing but dust. And how the wisdom is to know which piece of paper to pull out at which moment. And again, that is the work that we are being called to do as we show up fully in this world of work. I love how Mother Teresa, who did a lot, right? We know how much she did. And yet, one of the quotes from her is that we are not called to be successful, but faithful. So you feel that beautiful paradox of being and doing. And out of Guru Jeff's work, is to think about how might we be infinite love infinite love in a finite form. That we're humans and that many of us are exhausted right now. And the thought of having to do one more thing is just beyond the nature. And yet you are divine sparks. You are channeling love at every moment. And how do we hold that paradox? And so much of all of this always goes beyond words. Whenever I'm talking about the Mandorelo, I always feel like it's like, can you feel it? Can you feel it? We think about through time looking for win-win solutions, and a way to think about that is, cultural anthropologists study that, in some cultures in early times, they would limit the amount of food that people would get. And then others would limit how many people were allowed to be in a tribe or in a group. And you can see this conflict, and it's like, okay, is it less food or is it less people? Actually, in some, you can tell that in some cultures, they would actually kill twins because they would try to keep the groups small and didn't want multiple births. But the breakthrough, the Mandorla, was irrigation. It was not one or the other. And so it's how do we hold these paradoxes of being working parents or children that have parents who need to be cared for, right? But we're working. So working children, and it isn't, I'm going to just work really well, or I'm going to be a really good daughter or a really good mother, or, or aunt, uncle, whatever. It's what does that look like? What does that Mandorla look like? So I give you that to chew on, to gnaw on. We're playing with these questions of who am I? And as we did last week, and trying to capture what's arising in our introduction. Where do we want to go? We'll play with that today with our vision. And, and how do I want to get there? And where we come back to our values. Ethical leadership is really based in values and vision decision making. When I'm working with State Department fellows, and they're dealing with so many challenging situations as they're trying to solve really difficult problems in their communities around the environment and around safety for women and the other vulnerable communities, is they're deal with ethical dilemmas. And if they can base their decisions and their values and visions, and they have a team instead of doing it alone, they do so much better. And so we'll be working on both of those. What do you want to bring, this idea of strengths and joys and passions? You're going to hopefully capture those in your introductions and your SWOT. And then what might I be missing? We're talking about both threats or potential weaknesses or areas I want to improve. And we're going to capture those first in the SWOT and then in goals. So I just wanted to let you all know that you're working on the big questions that I hope will support your work journey, your work pilgrimage. But first, I wanted to play a bit with the elemental styles. Last week, you took the elemental styles assessment in the way of conflict. I wanted to start giving you a little bit of an overview, but I wanted you to be able to dive in on it together. How we approach problems is going to play into this journey, right? For some of us, before we go on a trip, we're really good about laying out all of our clothes and thinking through all the scenarios and interviewing people who have gone on that same trip and gathering facts and about the weather and then others of us get on an airplane and, not quite sure if we, put underwear in our bags, so we all approach things differently, and there is no one right way, but it's helpful to know about ourselves, what really supports us and gives us strength, and where we might have to mitigate the challenges that come. So we each have all 4 styles inside of us. We all use them, and leadership calls us to use all 4. So, I hope that you found taking the assessment supports you to learn more about those other aspects of yourself. You can almost think of it as 4 different aspects, 4 different ways that you would approach, 4 different parts of you that tune into different information sources. You are not, again, at the same time, not your style. It's just a preference, but they are 4 different radio stations. So as you're reinventing work and you're creating change, and you might create conflict either with your team or with your family or within yourself, is recognizing what radio station am I using and how can I gather information from the other radio stations. And we really do want to develop all 4 of these and host all of those styles on our teams. And so when I am a good planner and I'm gathering all this information for a trip, who might I want to talk to that might have a different style and would remind me of some of the other pieces of information that I might not have considered. So I'm going to give you a high level, and then I want you to dive in, and then we'll go into more detail when you come back. So if you took the assessment and you had A, or the first column had the highest score, you find that you probably prefer the Earth style. Earth, when we use Earth, we trust our senses. That information source to us is the most valuable. And so we're often, with this style, we'll find that we're very observant. There are those of you who will, we might see each other 5 years later, and that you would say, oh, Deidre, I remember that raven that you had on your wall behind your head, and that it was 4 degrees that morning we met, in April. And others of us, if we don't have strength in the style, won't necessarily remember meeting. When I use Earth, I need the pace of Earth. I need slow to medium. So I really appreciate, and honoring this within ourselves, time to process, time to consider the questions that are coming up as part of this class. And I also value facts. We can give ourselves that time and give others that time through asking open-ended questions that are not answered with a yes or a no, or transformative questions. So this style is at the slowest pace in terms of all the styles. Then Speeding up a bit, we have, if you scored on B or that second column, you value the radio station of emotions. You can come into a room and feel how everybody is feeling in the room. You can say, wow, that person's a little sad, or that person is angry. And the challenge with this style is that we'll often think angry at me, because we're so permeable, just like water. That ability for water to get in under our skin and pucker our fingers. Very aware of the morale of a group, but we don't like conflict. So sometimes we might shy away from reinventing our work because it's going to potentially create disharmony, either internally or with others. We have a great gift of humility. Water runs along the earth, along the humus. And when I'm using water, I really appreciate space. Space to spread out, space to consider the situation, space not to have to explain myself. So how can I give myself that space? And again, we have all of these inside of us. Then a bit faster is if you, with C, you would, or the third column, you are enthusiastic and passionate, and you love ideas and crazy dreams and solutions. And when conflict comes, we often think, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Things could get better. Things could really shift. And so that's the fire part within us. That part can give and give and give and channels and really appreciates acknowledgement for what is being seen. As I said before, fire is fascinating. It can burn down a forest, but we can run our hand through it. So how can I acknowledge that fire within me, that spark, that idea that is being called? And then finally, fastest of all, is the radio station of air, is our minds, our intellect, ruah, it just values going fast. You know, people, when they're using the style, can blow you away. And that part of us is focused on conceptual frameworks and methodologies and philosophies and games and structures and ways. And we can get going so fast that we forget about feelings. We get so focused on the problem that we might forget, oh my gosh, Dee Dee, you need a nap, or you need to slow down, or that's really scary what you're coming up with for our new work. So how might I listen to all of these four parts of myself to make sure as I'm moving forward that I'm centered? And it's interesting when I'm using the style from a conflict standpoint, as you read in the first part of The Way of Conflict, I really value very direct and quick feedback. And we'll talk about feedback more later today. All right, so I want to give you some time to explore these styles, and we're going to put you in groups of 4 to 5. We'll see. We're hoping that everybody ends up getting to hear about multiple styles. But these are the questions, and I'm going to ask Roxanne if she wouldn't mind putting them in the chat for us. What are the strengths of your preferred style? What have you noticed? Again, we want to keep focusing on our strengths, so start there. What do you notice that holds you back when you're using the style? And also, how can you be misunderstood? I think it's fascinating that with the earth style, for example, when I'm teaching, again, I spend most of my time teaching. If I have a student in the back of the room and they're just getting very quiet, crossing their arms and not responding, and just looking at me, I love asking teachers who come on State Department programs. I say, what kind of student do you think that is? And they'll say, oh, lazy, or not listening, or they have all these preconceptions. And then I tell them I took the hardest math class I took when I was in undergraduate was advanced calculus, and it was a graduate class. I was one of the few undergraduates in there, barely hanging on, writing notes madly. I was like, what am I doing in this class? And there was a guy who sat in the back of the class, never took a note. And he looked very using the earth style. And one day I came into class early and he was up in the front of the room drawing, and other students were going, do it again, do it again. And this young man was able to draw 3-dimensional cross sections of 4th-dimensional objects. And basically, the boy did not need to take notes. So how can we be misunderstood when we're using a particular style? He was not lazy, he was listening. And then last, as you talk to one another, think about how you appreciate others responding when you are using your style. If I'm using earth, do I like it when people are talking really fast and asking me for lots of things? No, I probably don't, but I can ask for that time. So back to the more we know ourselves, we can use our strengths well. All right, so looking at my time here. Yes, this is going to be great. Will give you another 15 minutes. Hopefully I think that should be enough time. Just sharing in your group on these questions. If I break them apart, I'm going to say that we spend a couple minutes on each question with people sharing. And then we'll come back together and do a quick debrief and move on to talking about your visions and how to create a vision statement. We have so much fun. Oh, Rick's got me figured out. So speaking of getting into our air, I was in my air at the beginning and nervous. And one of the things I kept saying was Howard Thurman instead of Thurgood Marshall. So thank you for all of you who are so polite. You didn't say anything, but you can always say something to me when I get going too fast. But yeah, Devil in the Grove is a book about Thurgood Marshall, not Howard Thurman. But Howard Thurman, we will talk about Howard Thurman later in terms of, he brings forward a beautiful, such beautiful, inspirited civil rights work. So he has been in my thoughts a lot as well. And I'm going to have a quote from him next week. So there you are. That's what happens sometimes when we're in air. We go too fast. So I was going too fast. Modeling. I did that on purpose, model it. Not in the least. Anyway. Okay, so continuing on, I want to make sure, let's see, I'm going here, back. So I want to come to vision. So I'm hoping everybody has, if you might have a pen and paper or something to write with, I'm going to do a little thought experiment and thinking about a way to start to think about what our vision is for the world and for ourselves is to place ourselves out into the future and the best of all possible worlds. Sometime in the crazy anything is possible future, you are walking down a street and you see a newspaper headline or a magazine cover. If there still are newspapers and magazines in the future, but just in case there are, maybe it's on a screen. I don't know. Maybe it's in your glasses. It just shows up, but there's a headline that you have been waiting to see. The dream that you have comes true. And this can be the biggest, most wonderful dreams that you have. And you can have multiple headlines. So it could be soon or generations from now, your dream has come true. What would be that headline? And what would be 3 points of that article? Maybe, and so under the headline, what would be some of the main points or highlights of that article, describing how that might have come true and or how you participated in helping that to come true? I'm going to give you some time to think about that. Personal and global, Charlie, please. Yeah, so both. I find the best visions include both us and the world. What brings you alive and the world that you want to be living into. And dreaming big, big, big. Just one more minute. Again, vast of all possible worlds. And it can be for the work that you do. Or someplace on your pilgrimage route you would like to land. Or how the future of the world might look. All right. So the next part of this exercise is to, and you're going to have time in small groups to share some of how these came, but I want you to do a little more individual work before we can dive into that more. A next trick is to using these headlines is to start to notice what are these dreams? Where are these dreams coming from? Is to create a vision statement. And you saw in the personal leadership plan template, now that I'm did make sure it was on Teachable and you're able to download it, is that you want to write your vision statement in present tense. And I always love to start it. I envision a world where, and so I envision a world where war is obsolete. It doesn't make sense to engage in violent combat, where the world, that the world that I envision is, we use logical forms of conflict resolution and dialogue to solve our great problems of our time. But in present tense, not someday, it will be. It creates creative tension in our minds and in those we share it with. Envision a world where every woman and child is safe in their own homes and on the streets. So that type of beginning. So bringing in what you want for the world and also what you want for you. You'll see in this example that came from one of the State Department fellows is to be a human rights. Part of her vision is to be a human rights attorney, working with at-risk women. So you want it to be magnetizing and exciting for you and for, as you share it. You want to dream big. Miles Horton founded the Highlander Folk School. He was the first executive director, and they did leadership training for the civil rights movement. Highlander Folk School is where Rosa Parks was trained. Highlander Folk School, Miles Horton. And Miles Horton used to say that if you can accomplish your vision in your lifetime, it's too small. I'm suspicious that Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech was influenced by that belief. So dream big. If we get ourselves a couple steps closer to the visions that you create, I suspect our world would be better. We want to include in our vision statements you and the world. So how would you like to play in this work? And also making sure that as you create this vision, this dream that's setting your course on your reinventing work journey, what do you need to make your life delicious and nurturing and sustainable? All the good things. So you might be, might be able to travel and be with the people that you want to be with. All the while you're getting to support this vision. So I'd love to give you now just 5 minutes to start noticing what you might put in that vision statement. You don't have to complete it by any stretch, but I know I'm always appreciative when I'm given that space to slow down and to think on that. So you've got 5 minutes now and more time in the future. So. Another way to ask that question is, if you couldn't fail, what would be fun to do? When you think about how you want to play in a vision, in your vision. Again, back to that magnetizing and exciting. About 2 more minutes. So make sure you have time in small groups. You'll get to come back to this over the weeks ahead, but it's just noticing what's arising, what's calling. Yeah. So I wanted to provide, as we start to share with one another around our visions and eventually around our values, a feedback model that I find to be really helpful when people do want feedback. And again, when we're in small groups, please do ask if someone is sharing, if they would like feedback. This pic is making me hungry looking at this picture. Sorry, everybody, we're all probably ready for dinner and we haven't gotten to have it yet. But it's an easy way for me to remember. Again, you can tell I love conceptual frameworks. When I'm nervous and I want to provide people feedback, is to start with the positive. Again, gets us into our neocortex. What are you noticing that you appreciate? What are things that seem to be really working? Again, calls us up into where we can think in past, present, and future, use our creative problem solving. Informative, what things are arising for you? What insights are you getting as you're hearing from someone? And then from there is to share what might be even better. And again, it's focusing, again, supporting another person's success. So I give you that as an easy feedback model. For those of you, I know we've got a lot of mentors here on our call. And if we were all together, I would be bringing a piece of pie. I would be bringing everybody pie. So just, I'm going to just put that out there. Someday we're all together, maybe at a Creation Spirituality Communities gathering. I owe you pie, everyone. So hold me to that. So as we're going to go into small group breakouts, we're going to be able to do that for 15 minutes. But I wanted to make sure, again, as we've said, engaging in dialogue, create space for everybody to speak, make sure you keep your answers succinct. And always please ask, would you like feedback if something arises? You all, again, bring a wealth of wisdom, and depending on where people are, they'll be able to share if they're ready for that or not. But here's your questions. And these, if Roxanne, you would put in the chat, I would appreciate. Just to integrate our experience, what Mandorelo do you feel like you're working with when you're reinventing work? I appreciate how some of you have shared how you've been holding the prophetic with the practical as a Mandorelo, as an example. What did you notice as you just explored elemental styles and you? What do you not want to forget there? And this is an opportunity for you to share some of your headlines and what's starting to come up in your vision. And see, noticing, it's almost there's a Ronald Heifetz, who teaches at Harvard, talks about this idea of, as leaders, we want to be both on the dance floor and then also on the balcony watching ourselves. And so it's always fascinating to notice, what do I want to share with this group right now? What's arising in me, and that there's clues in that. So how we can be good trackers of ourselves. So you've got 15 minutes. You'll be in groups of 4, and we'll come back to close. And I hope you enjoy diving into these questions. I hope you didn't feel like you're drinking too much from a fire hose. I gave you a lot of content and not very much time. So I hope, again, these were just beginnings of conversations, beginnings of exercises, so that hopefully they will support you. I wanted to share a last, let's see, here we go. I'll do last slide to share what's coming this week. So over the next week, if you would, I'm trying to keep us on time. I know some of you are people waiting for you for dinner, and it's been long days, but this week, as you are diving in more to the readings, is to complete your vision section. And again, you're not going to turn in your personal leadership plan until the end of the class. So I don't want you to feel worried that, oh, I've got to have the introduction perfect, the vision and the SWOT perfect, not at all. But just in terms of pacing yourself, because these 7 weeks, of course, are flying by already, is that, is to work on your vision this week, add to your SWOT, as I was saying, making sure you're getting lots of strengths in there, reading from the source books, and Teachable has your assignments on it. And if you have any questions or you're struggling with Teachable at all, please don't hesitate to email me. And then making sure you give yourself some time, even just 1/2 an hour over the coming week, doing some type of reflection through artist meditation. And again, thank you all for sharing earlier some of the ways that you're using that reflection approach. So it is on the hour, 7 o'clock my time here in Montana. Later in the morning with Linda in Australia. I'm happy to stay if anybody has any questions, but I wanted to, again, thank you. And I was going to close reading Clearing one last time. Do not try to serve the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands, and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue. Thank you all again for choosing to be part of this community.